I have the pleasure of introducing Ralph Weschler. He and I are roommates this weekend, and I couldn't be more thrilled to get to know him better. He's an accomplished clinical psychologist with a distinguished career spanning several decades. He has a wealth of experience and expertise in various facets of psychology. Dr. Weschler's journey in the field began with his academic achievements, including a Ph.D. in clinical psychology from the University of Colorado at Boulder. Throughout his career, he's held numerous academic appointments, demonstrating his commitment to education and mentorship. Notably, his clinical experiences encompass a wide range of roles, from private practice to staff psychologist at the Department of Veterans Affairs Medical Center, where he played critical roles in the care of psychiatric patients. It's my pleasure to welcome Ralph.
Thank you very much for those kind words. I don't deserve them. It's my pleasure today to welcome friend and colleague, Dr. Ray Bergner. Ray has got his Ph.D. in 1973 at the University of Colorado Boulder. Went there as a Colorado native and did his dissertation with Peter Thorio. And then joined the faculty at Illinois State University in 1977, started a private practice in the town of Normal, Illinois, where he was able to find some abnormals that you could provide treatment to. He has been a prolific writer of descriptive psychology papers and a prolific presenter. I believe Ray has presented at every single conference. And typically, as is today, he provides the opening salvo for our terrific gatherings. I feel like I have a particular affinity for Ray and his contributions to the society because they're kindred spirits. He's focused on psychopathology, as I have, and psychotherapy, and generations of interns and trainees. But I think
No, it's my fault. I got it.
okay. Generations of trainees and supervisees have benefited from the countless papers I've required them to read and Ray's decisive conceptualization have really illuminated clinical phenomena in ways that have opened doors for very effective treatments, not just for my trainees, but also my own application in my work with patients myself. Beyond his contributions in literature, also he's been past president of society a couple times, editor of advances, and he's moved away from some of that focus into more philosophical discussion of descriptive psychology. He's still doing teaching, supervision, and research at the university, but he's no longer a practitioner, private practice in that way. Well, let me introduce Ray, who's going to speak today about meaningless. He's going to speak in a very meaningful way.
Okay, thank you, Ralph. Oh, where's the best place for me?
Right there, so people can see you.
Here. Okay, all right. Thank you, Ralph. Also, thanks to Charles and Craig for getting this whole thing together, which I've done twice, and I know it's not easy. It's a lot of work, and a lot of things go wrong. That's good to do something for that. Okay, so I'm not working on anything that I thought would be interesting, unless you happen to be interested in factor analysis and that's used in psychology. So probably. So what I'm going to do is read something that I did years ago, published years ago. And what I'll do is read the whole article is really too long. I'm going to read excerpts from it. And I think they do hang together to make kind of an organic whole, even though leaving things out. So this is not in advances of the public elsewhere. I'd probably be really hard to take notes on this. I can email a copy to anyone who would like it, or you can just go to Google Scholar and put in Bergner meaninglessness and it come right up. So let me start with a couple of, so we're titled Therapeutic Approaches to Problems of Meaninglessness. Let me start with a couple of famous quotes about meaninglessness from a guy who pretty sharp, pretty good psychologist, guy named Shakespeare. So he has Macbeth saying at one point, life is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Hamlet, at one place in that famous play, he's talking about his current state. And he says, how weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seem to me all the uses of this world. There are two statements here that capture very well the state of meaninglessness. Because is this okay? I'm just gonna say, if I hold this here.
Yeah, it's fine, just hit the space bar, so next slide.
Yeah, okay. Right. So, it goes by many names. Clients will say that they feel, quote, empty, aimless, unmotivated, apathetic, or life. They will relate that their lives, quote, seem pointless and without any real purpose, that they are, quote, just going through the motions in life, or even that they, quote, can't see the point of going on. Their therapists may say that these persons, that they are depressed, anhedonic, alienated, or anomic. Lots of words here. Whatever the terms employed, all of these persons are referring to a state in which individuals are, like Macbeth and Hamlet, experiencing a very significant lack of meaning in their lives, a state of meaninglessness. It is this state of meaninglessness, its little discussed causes, and its therapeutic remediation that constitute the subject matter of this article. Question, the meaning of life question. What is the meaning of life? The nature of the present concern might suggest that as therapists, we need to have answered that famous question, what is the meaning of life? If, after all, we are to help our clients to find meaning, is it not a prerequisite that we have answered this question for ourselves? In one sense, the answer to this question is no. In another sense, yes. Let me explain. The form of the question, what is the meaning of life, suggests first that there is some answer that can be given in the form of a verbal proposition. And second, that this answer could be universal, that it could capture the meaning of life for all persons. Centuries of attempts to provide such universal propositional assertions about life's meaning have to date yielded no answer and has gained anything approaching the assent of even a substantial minority of people. This suggests two things. First, it suggests that no such universal propositional answer may be possible. As Watts once stated, quote, problems that remain persistently unsolvable should always be suspected as questions asked in the wrong way. Second, it suggests that therapists who would require of themselves that they answer this question before proceeding therapeutically are in serious danger of never being able to help their patients. However, if we are to address our clients' genuine concerns about a lack of meaning in their lives, as therapists, we do require knowledge about what makes for meaningful existence. If such knowledge cannot be obtained in the form of universal propositional truths, where can it come from? Empirically, lots of studies here cited. Empirically, the majority of people report the presence of substantial meaning in their lives. The most fortunate among them describe their lives in terms such as, quote, full, rich, worthwhile, and satisfying. They do not describe them as, quote, empty, pointless, or absurd. One such person, watching right now, is Lori Bergner. I gather quotes wherever I get them. One such person, when queried, reported that questions about the meaning of life don't even occur to me. Well, don't even occur to me. They don't cross my mind. It's just not an issue for me. Okay. Compare Wittgenstein's famous assertion that, quote, the solution to the problem of life is seen in the vanishing of the problem. The absence of the problem. Or further, a great many other persons find parts of their lives highly meaningful, even if other parts are not. They may, for example, find their family life and their avocations, such as music or sport, highly meaningful, even if their work seems to them somewhat impoverished in this respect. As therapists, we can best help those with problems of meaning, not by attempting to answer the intractable question of the meaning of life, but by determining empirically, A, how the majority of people do in fact find meaning, and B, what obstacles others most frequently encounter in their efforts to do so. And so, the meaning of meaningful. The best single expression to capture the notion of meaningful as employed in this article is simply, quote, worth doing. An action is meaningful in the measure that its perpetrator finds it to be worth doing, in the measure that he or she finds it to have a point, to serve a purpose, or otherwise to possess value. Expressed negatively, an action lacks meaning in the measure that it leaves its perpetrator asking such questions as, quote, what's the point? Quote, what's the purpose? Or where is there any value in doing this? Extrapolating from actions to whole lives, regarded here as histories of action, a meaningful life becomes one that the individual finds worth living. Such a life does not leave persons with a sense that their lives are pointless, purposeless, empty, or a waste. It does not leave them with a feeling that life is unbalanced, weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable, or that it is a tale told by an idiot signifying nothing. The bases upon which persons find such work or value in their behavior and lives are, far from being obscure and ineffable, very familiar to us. They are readily observable of their everyday life and have long been documented in the psychological literature, though not as a rule in the present connection. These bases are the instrumental, intrinsic, and spiritual values that persons may and very often do derive from their behavior. Let us examine each of these in turn. First, instrumental value. Just following the outline interesting here. The general formula for instrumental behavior is P does B in order to achieve X. A behavior B is engaged in not for its own sake, but because it is deemed instrumental by the person in bringing about some desired state of affairs X. The achievement of the state of affairs would then constitute the instrumental value of the behavior. For example, if a young teacher were leaving his home in the morning and his daughter Susie were to ask him why he had to go to work. He might inform her that he's doing so to make a living, for their family, and to get young people to understand and appreciate literature. Okay? Such outcomes would constitute instrumental values of his behavior. In extreme cases, the desired outcome of instrumental behavior may constitute highly valued causes around which persons may organize their whole existence. For example, to promote world peace, to protect consumers from unscrupulous companies, to spread the gospel, or to win an Olympic gold medal. And intrinsic value. General formula for, again, intrinsic behavior or intrinsically motivated behavior is a concept with a long history in psychology. Its formula is P does B for its own sake. Here, a person engages in behavior for the value and or satisfaction inherent in B itself, independently of any instrumental ends that the B may or may not bring about. Even the individual converses with a friend, plays a game, listens to music, reads a book, solves a problem, makes love, or plays with their children, in whole or in part for the reason that he or she derives value and or satisfaction from these activities themselves. A young architect, surprise Paul, my brother Paul said this to me years ago. Expressed as well when he said to me of his design work that, quote, if I wasn't lucky enough to get to do this for a living, I'd do it for a hobby. Okay, intrinsic interest. There's no reward. Thus, Susie's dad, when pressed by her with further why questions, might inform her that he also teaches because he loves it and finds it endlessly satisfying and challenging in its own right. Once again, we encounter extreme cases in which persons become so immersed in activities such as participating in athletics, creating art, building a business, or caring for children, that these become core life activities around which they center much of their existence. Spiritual value. To date, and this goes back, so I haven't really updated here, but at the time I wrote this, to date, spiritual behavior has received relatively little attention in the psychological literature. In spiritual behavior, a person's behaving for reasons that are characterized by ultimacy, totality, and boundary condition. Repeat. In my hypothetical example, where Susie, failing to be satisfied, keep asking this why question, but fine. Failing to be satisfied with her father's answers regarding why he must go to work, should she continue to press him with her why question, she might cause him to consider matters that belong to the domain of spirituality. With regard to ultimacy and boundary condition, she might cause him to go beyond immediate, limited ends accomplished by his behavior to ultimate ones. Quote, when all is said, such as, quote, when all is said and done, what is the ultimate purpose of what I am doing? The purpose that lies at the boundary beyond which there are no further reasons or justifications. The consigned explanation has come to an end somewhere. She might force him to think, in my behavior, am I acting in relation to some ultimate being? With regard to totality, it might cause him to consider questions such as, what is the purpose, not just of this action today, but of my whole life? Or, quote, what is the purpose of everything that is? What does it all mean? We're pushing it here. At this level of ultimacy, totality, and boundary condition, we observe some persons, both religious and non-religious, who have arrived at personal answers to these questions that provide enormous value for them in their actions and lives. The religious among them might give us their ultimate answers, one such as the following: I believe that in doing this, I am doing God's will, and or I'm loving and praising God, and or I'm achieving union with God. The non-religious among them might profess ultimates such as, and I got all of these from just like got a book of quotations, just quotes, that's all it was. For the non-religious, it might profess ultimates such as, quote, in doing this, I am trying to love, to touch others' lives, or quote, I'm trying to do good, to do something worthwhile, to make this world a better place than the one I found, or quote, to ultimately achieve full enlightenment. Thus, some persons live their lives in the light of such ultimates. Compare the classical notion of living sub specie aeternitas, and derive the sorts of values from their actions and lives that come from living in this way. Note here, the enterprise of promulgating the meaning of life to others may often be seen on the present analysis as a case of taking one's own personal ultimate and promoting it as a universal one to be embraced by all persons. A paradigm case of meaningful action. From the board, you kind of keep me posted, like,
Yeah.
20 after, what is it?
It's 9:30 now.
It's 9:30 now.
Yeah. 9:28.
Okay. A paradigm case of meaningful action. From the foregoing, okay, I get those minutes at the beginning. From the foregoing, it should be clear that deriving instrumental, intrinsic, and spiritual value from one's action need not be mutually exclusive. One may, in a single behavior or series of behaviors, realize all these values simultaneously. Thus, our hypothetical feature with this single recurrent behavior of teaching young people may achieve all of them. All right. Irving Goffman, in his brilliant essay, Alienation from Interaction, begins with a characterization of what constitutes optimum interaction between persons. He then notes this characterization may be used as a single quote point of reference from which all the various sorts of failures to achieve it may be understood. In the same way, the case of persons behaving in such a way as to derive substantial, instrumental, intrinsic, and spiritual values simultaneously may be employed as a unit point of reference from which all failure to achieve meaning may be organized and understood. It may be employed in other terms as a paradigm case, and in this instance, an optimum or ideal case in which persons are deriving abundantly all the sorts of value and meaning from their behavior that seem available to persons. In support of this conception as a paradigm case of meaningful action and used as a point of departure for understanding failures to achieve it, it is instructive to consider what many would view as the epitome of meaninglessness, namely the absurd, as is described in the existential literature. Consider the excellent example of an absurd world captured in this actual suicide note. Actual suicide note. This fellow wrote, after committing suicide, he wrote, imagine a happy group of morons who are engaged in work. They're carrying bricks in an open field. As soon as they have stacked the bricks, all the bricks at one end of the field, they proceed to transport them to the opposite end. They continue without stop, and every day of every year, they are busy doing the same thing. One day, one of the morons stops long enough to ask himself what he's doing. He wonders what purpose there is in carrying the bricks. And from that point on, he is not quite as content with his occupation as he had been before. I am the moron who wonders why he's carrying the bricks. End quote. This description, highly reminiscent of Camus' classical description of Sisyphus, may be usefully contrasted with our paradigm case of meaningful action. When viewed thus, what emerges is that the absurd world it describes is the diametric opposite of our paradigm case. The man's precise complaint is that in the world as he finds it, there is no instrumental, intrinsic, or spiritual dignities. His actions, analogized with the pointless carrying the bricks back and forth, accomplish no valued utilitarian end that he can detect. They possess no intrinsic value for him. And unlike Sisyphus, he can find no spiritual or transcendent value in the activity that might enable him to endure or even to affirm it. The absurd, the quintessence of meaningless, is precisely what is generated when instrumental, intrinsic, and spiritual values are missing from the behavior. So based on the foregoing analysis, the present therapeutic approach to persons suffering from problems of meaninglessness to assess and to aid in the removal of barriers that keep these persons from obtaining the sort of value from their behavior that are characterized in our paradigm case. Skip a little bit there. And then go to the intellectual seeker scenario. There's one scenario that people bring in. In this scenario, client comes to us, this is his or her scenario. In this scenario, an individual reports a search for meaning in which he or she struggles to find meaning almost exclusively by thinking, discussing, philosophizing, or other primarily intellectual means, but finds that these kinds of solution attempts are to little avail. The usual diagnosis in such cases is that the individual is, to use Pete's terms, not giving value to find value. One gives value by acting and does so in the following way. One has various places to be filled in one's world, ranging from places for things as mundane and ephemeral as a good immediate thirst quencher, to places for things as central and enduring as a romantic life partner, a best friend, or fulfilling life work. One gives value by actively casting or screen testing candidates to fill these places. One has a place for a good thirst quencher and tries a new drink that just came on the market. One has a place in one's life for a long-term romantic partner. And that's an appealing coworker for a date. One has a place for interesting, fulfilling, and financially viable life work and tries out a new college major that seems to offer such possibilities. One gives these persons, things, and activities value by giving them a place in one's life. One then finds value, not by sitting back in the proverbial armchair and speculating, but by actively engaging them and appraising how well or ill they fill these places in one's world. Therapeutically, when one diagnoses the clients are involved in this intellectual searcher scenario, the recommended thrust becomes twofold. First is that of helping these individuals by whatever means to abandon their previous solution attempts to seek meaning exclusively from a thinker, spectator position. Second is that of promoting new behavior wherein these clients, in a manner analogous to a drama director, actively cast new persons or activities in vital places or roles in their lives and evaluate how well or ill these candidates fill these places. Self-preoccupation. The anthropologist Carlos Castaneda, in an interview concerning his apprenticeship to the Indian sorcerer Don Juan, characterized his unhappy state prior to their encounters. Quote, I couldn't see any way of life that really excited me. This was exaggerated by my habit of introspection. I was always looking within and talking to myself. The inner dialogue seldom stopped. Don Juan turned my eyes outward and taught me how to see the magnificence of the world and how to accumulate personal power. In our paradigm case scenario of meaningful actions, persons derive substantial, instrumental, intrinsic, and spiritual value from their behavior. The derivation of such value implies or requires something further, namely, that persons to a significant degree are immersed in their participation in the behavior. They are absorbed in the conversation, captivated by the lecture, transfixed by the music, caught up in the game, or lost in their pursuit of the academic or work problem they're trying to solve. Anything that might disrupt this immersion or undivided attentional focus may be the occasion of diminished meaning or satisfaction with the activity in question. In Galton's terms, it may be the occasion for becoming alienated from the activity.
Can you say that one more time? Alienating
From the activity.
Oh, sorry. Foremost among these distractions in my clinical experience is self-preoccupation. The individual cannot be fully in his or her behavior participation because attention must be pulled away from it and focused on the self. Concerns about how one is doing, how one is being seen by others, whether one's place with another is secure, and so forth, assume a preemptive importance and render the person no longer a full participant, but now a distracted, otherwise preoccupied, partial spectator in the activity. Such self-preoccupation has been described amply and well in the area of human sexuality. It has long been known that such self-conscious concern interferes greatly with one's ability to participate fully and satisfyingly in conceptual intercourse. The detrimental effects of self-preoccupation have also been noted in the areas of conversation and other interpersonal encounters. Okay, so I said a little bit about therapy here, but I'm just going to do the scenario on we had time to talk about therapy. Inability to appreciate significance. Osorio relates the apocryphal story of a man returning home from a round of golf and being asked by a friend what he has been doing that morning. Well, the man retorts, I've been walking around on grass and knocking little white balls into holes in the ground, and then doing the whole thing over again. That's the description of what he's been doing. The man, needless to say, has found the activity rather meaningless. The essential picture here is a person who cannot appreciate anything other than the most concrete, performative, and thus meaningless level of significance. Like people who describe their work as, quote, pencil pushing and paper shuffling, their time with their own children as, quote, babysitting, or sexual intercourse as the old in and out. That's from A Clockwork Orange, I got that one. This man can see no worthwhile instrumental accomplishment, no intrinsic value, and no spiritual significance in the game of golf. Just knock under the white hole. The white balls in the hole in the room. End of story. Some clients, like our golfer, are unable to appreciate any higher order significance in what they are doing. In the cases at issue here, it is not that these clients are engaged in activities which virtually no one could find meaningful. Activities akin to the proverbial swimming in the same boat on the assembly line all day. So in this case, we're not talking about that kind of thing. Rather, in these cases, the observer can see that there is greater significance in what these people are doing than they are able to find for themselves. For example, one woman, a rather competent and dedicated case investigator for a state child welfare department, laughed at me cynically when I described her as, quote, working very hard to protect young children from abuse. Okay, that's how I described her. Rejecting my description, you heard that in her view, she was, quote, just doing what it takes to get through each day, get my paycheck. That's an example of it. Therapeutically, the goal here is to help such individuals to appreciate higher order significance. Especially ones that might, as they work with a dedicated social worker, already be obvious to others in their behavior. I found it to helpful to use Osorio's little white balls image as a heuristic device to introduce this whole notion of behavioral value or significance that is there, but is being missed by the behavior, and to explore with clients significance that they may be missing in their own behavior. When there is resistance, that usually based on cynicism, reluctance to view oneself in a positive light and or threat inherent in seeing some higher order significance, the bases of such resistance must be ascertained and addressed. Critic disqualification problem. The foremost place that clients rob their lives of meaning is that they disqualify their own actions. Operating in the role of self-critic, they adopt certain standards of adequacy, and when their actions do not meet these standards, they declare them deficient and worthless. Two scenarios here. The first one is called the law of ceaseless productivity. It applies to a lot of people who've gone through higher education, become professors, clinicians, and on. Okay, the law of ceaseless productivity. But this law runs as follows. If some action that I engage in is not constructive, that is productive of some important utilitarian end, it is without value and a complete waste of time. The person who has adopted such a personal standard lives in a completely utilitarian world where every behavior, if it is to be counted worthwhile, doing okay, must be instrumental in the production of some further important end. Life is essentially work, essentially about being ceaselessly constructive, productive, and useful in everything one does. Anything else, for example, playing games, having a conversation, and listening to music, whose value is entirely intrinsic, or if instrumental accomplishes nothing important, is a, quote, waste of time. One should never do such, quote, frivolous, sterile things when one could be accomplishing something. Some of the sense of meaninglessness that such a critic stance creates is well captured by two famous literary figures. Emerson once described a personal sense he had that we are always getting to live, but never living. Yeats, in a similar vein, stated that, quote, all life weighed in the balance of my own life seems to me to be a preparation for something that never happens. Obviously, as stated many times in this article, the fact of action serving to bring about some significant instrumental end is an important source of meaning for people. However, when carried to extremes, when everything is declared meaningful only by virtue of its instrumental value, people get involved in a world of infinite regress. A is of value only insofar as it brings about B, but B only insofar as it brings about C, and so on ad infinitum. In such a world where nothing is intrinsic, and or where there are not the boundaries to infinite regress imposed by spiritual ultimates, we wind up, back to our host, always getting to live but never living, always waiting for something that never happens. The therapeutic goal in such cases is that clients, by whatever means, abandon the practice of subjecting every action to its instrumental standards. Further and more positively, they would require employ new standards that would permit them to appreciate the intrinsic and or spiritual value of actions, as well as what might be termed, quote, the importance of the unimportant. Finally, the law of eternity. Tolstoy, at a point in his life when he was contemplating suicide, expressed the basis for his despair and crisis of meaning in the following way, quote, what will come from what I am doing now and may do tomorrow? What will come from my whole life? Otherwise expressed, why should I live? Why should I wish for everything? Why should I do anything? Again, in other words, is there any meaning in my life which will not be destroyed by the inevitable death awaiting? Okay. Is there any meaning in life which will not be destroyed by the inevitable death awaiting? What's the point if you're gonna die? For those who, like Tolstoy, have imposed extended temporal duration and even eternity as a standard of meaningfulness upon themselves, the fact of some action or experience or accomplishment being transient is taken as grounds for finding no meaning or value in it. What is the point, they wonder? It will be over in an hour. If that sandcastle will be wiped away in 2 hours. If I must die someday, if both I and my achievements will disappear without a trace from human awareness someday. Tolstoy. Therapeutically, clients who have enacted and are repeatedly enforcing the law of eternity need to be brought to an awareness of what they are proactively doing. They are passing a law. This is their law, they're the author, what they're doing. The fact that they have a choice in this regard and of their options, especially that of repealing this law from their personal books. Two arguments that may be made in this connection are briefly stated the following. Even in the world that these persons yearn for, where we and our deeds would last forever, the question of what makes for meaning, the question of how to find value in one's actions in life would remain. It wouldn't go away. Indeed, in such a world, the problem would be even more acute. Who would want, like Sisyphus, to live forever in a meaningless world? Factually, second point, factually, we and our experiences and achievements are ephemeral. Despite this, countless people lead highly meaningful lives. Therefore, you're talking about line here. Important bases for meaninglessness, the nature of which have been detailed above, must exist that in no way depend on eternal duration. Summary. Paradigmatically, meaningful action and by extension, meaningful living inhere in emerged participation in activities from which one derives substantial, instrumental, intrinsic, and or spiritual value. The greater the departure from this paradigm, the existential absurd being the extreme case, the more meaningless will one's existence seem. Employing this paradigm case as a point of departure, the job of the psychotherapist becomes that of first diagnosing obstacles to clients securing such value in their behavior, and second, assisting them in the removal or diminution of these obstacles. The empirically most common of these obstacles, as well as some therapeutic approaches to addressing them, have been discussed in this article.
I wanted to just lead off with a, I don't know if it's a question or a comment, but one of the things, and I don't have specific examples, I'm afraid, at the moment, but the degree to which the kind of combat PTSD actually deal with would create some unique problems of meanings. And wondered if you have any thoughts off the top of your head.
That's going to create what crises and meaningless to.
Well, just sort of a moving forward from that trauma, you know, that we're all gonna die. Human beings are all beasts and monsters, you know, there are various ways I think it kind of manifests to shift the big picture into something that sort of resembles meaningfulness. The meaning of life was extracted by the trauma.
So they've come home, the whole view of the world. It's a hell, often, I no longer believe in God. Couldn't be, this could be a good God.
I don't believe in you, I don't believe in me, I don't believe in government, we're all gonna die, and I can kill you like that.
Yeah, people, I saw people do this, and this is the new world. Yeah, so, okay, the question then is, what do you think about that?
Well, just any thoughts you might have about that kind of dilemma, I think, you know, I think you can sort of break it out into those areas.
It's not an answer, it's an example, but I remember I had a client once, he had been in combat. And so he comes home, goes to our college, I asked him. And one night he goes to a local bar. And he gets a bottle of beer. He's standing, so like, let's say, here's the bar, there's the bartender. And somebody just comes up and taps him on the shoulder. And he without thinking, he grabs his beer bottle, breaks it, goes like that. Like, that's the new world. It's a dangerous world. Okay. So, okay. In 25 words or less. How did he move them out of that? Okay. Wow. I think that's too much to bite off. Right.
Let's take some other
Yeah,
questions.
start it out,
You know,
because that's a great question. It's a big question. We can talk about it for hours. You certainly you do. Your goal is to say, you know, to help them to move on from the old world, or the world they've acquired to a new world that is a whole lot safer place. People by many, many good people. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just one comment is that I think you have to acknowledge that stuff really did happen, and then move people through a route of sorting out possibilities and probabilities, and using that as a foundation to move forward.
Yeah, the unthinkable did happen to you. Yeah.
Fool me once, fool me twice,
I think Martin has a comment online.
Okay. Martin Glenn, got you? Marty?
Oh no, it was me. Do you hear me?
Oh, Martin, oh, I'm sorry. Martin Svenglin, sorry, I was thinking it was somebody else. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a question. I wondered about the spiritual value, and it struck me that maybe it's a special case of instrumental value, or is it really it's a category in its own? Because if you really do something because of for its own sake, it has an intrinsic value to you, would you then need a further reason, like spiritual value, or is the spiritual value maybe the end where you stop giving more instrumental values to your behavior?
Have two things. I hear you very, not very good at all, and I'm having trouble understanding. Somebody just quick, give me a quick sketch with Martin, just I'm having trouble with it.
Oh, you can't hear me.
If you are able to find intrinsic value.
Yeah.
Do you need spiritual value?
Oh, okay.
But I'm not sure that that's the.
Is that? So Martin, is that consistent with what you were saying?
Yeah,
If you
yeah,
can
it's
find
consistent
if you
with
can
that.
find
Yeah.
intrinsic value, do you really need spiritual value?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I think in many cases people don't. Not at all. So, yeah, it's like, maybe I'm living a life where, whatever, I'm a demon musician, or I'm just so into what I'm doing, or to whatever. And it may, you can do, that's perfectly viable, you don't have to say there must be something beyond this. It's sufficient for many people empirically, I think, that's good enough. For other people, no, that's not enough, they can't see it that way, they have to, no, I believe there's more, the way I see things, there's more, there's another whole layer of things, so. Does that get at what?
Yeah, partly. Yeah, it's, thank you.
Thank you.
Strikes me that individuals who have, gotten stuck into a supercritic position can be especially vulnerable to this kind of behavior, where everything becomes subject to just cutting criticism that reduces things to nothing.
Yeah.
And he is in a powerful position, delivering these destructive chops.
Yeah, so being a supercritic, being somebody who perpetually turns on yourself and
And the world in general.
and all of the world, yeah, is, that'll do it. For everything you're doing, you're just turning on yourself and negating it and disqualifying it and regarding it as somehow debased or, yeah. That's a good way to do it. What's the point then?
Which, doing that has an important meaning for the individual.
They get great satisfaction out of it. I knew a guy like that. He got tremendous satisfaction.
At the expense of many others, but certainly.
So I know one of
It-
Pete's,
it's-
take one of Pete's thoughts about it is there are pleasures in being a critic.
Right.
They're more obvious in certain places, like if you're the movie critic or the drama critic, and the next guy says, "Oh, that was a great film," and you can say, "Well, you might think so, but I have some serious problems with it, blah, blah, blah." There's some satisfactions, and some satisfactions with criticizing. I went to this meeting the other day, I know what this person did. Oh, fetching.
After Joe,
Ned had his hand up. Ned, you have a question?
Errol also has his hand up in the chat. And
No, I think
Joe,
we'll go to 5 after, and then we'll have a shortened break and come back and convene at 10 after. So just probably room for one more question.
I thought it might look like the joys of fetching. Criticism has its satisfactions. So, Joe.
I was just struck as I was listening to your presentation in various ways of various kinds of problems that people can get into by the common thread of the central importance of actor rather than observer. In every case, it's actor. You have to engage the actor. The people, by not acting, by being in observer mode, they have no satisfaction. I was reminded of something Tony Putnam said a long time ago. Satisfaction accompanies intrinsicness. But you can't have that satisfaction if you're not actually doing the thing you find intrinsic.
Can I add to that?
Over and over again, it's actor.
And Joe, to add to that, Tony said satisfaction accompanies participation.
Oh, yes, that's right. And the last thing, the supercritic, sometimes it can work, although I never had the chutzpah to nail my colleague who was the supercritic. I also didn't have the relationship by pointing out that when you're the supercritic, you are acting as a critic. You're actually doing something, so no wonder you get satisfaction out of that. But I thought he'd get really mad and it'd be pretty confrontative to bring that up in that circumstance.
Yeah.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you very much.